Welcome to the Pete Sousa Show, presented by the good folks at Slovakics. Can't forget our good folks at Daniel Stark Injury Lawyers, too, who I'm just hearing from right now. I put up yesterday, if you watched, we did my favorite horror movie villains and compared them to athletes or coaches or sports personalities. And I started the segment in the Halloween spirit, wearing the Michael Myers mask, and we had a lot of fun. We talked a little bit about Daniel Stark Injury Lawyers and how if Michael Myers, wow, he would be a great client for Daniel Stark Injury Lawyers, right? He would. So we love Daniel Stark Injury Lawyers. We love Halloween. Happy Halloween. This is it for the Halloween season. Like, as much as people say, like, I dig into this a little too much and I can be a little weird for a grown man, like, this is it. All this is coming down. I might keep the skull just because it's cool. But yeah, this is a wrap on Halloween. I watched the first 30 minutes of Halloween last night. I couldn't fall asleep, so I watched the first 30 minutes of the movie. And this is the last time I'll be talking about Halloween or the movie for a long time. There is a scene in the movie that is the best. And God, I should have given it to you, Scotty. There's Jamie Lee Curtis, and she's got three of her friends. And Michael Myers drives by like a real slow roll to kind of size everybody up. And they say, "Is that Devon Givens?" and look, this is not a dude who looks like Devon Givens, okay? He just kind of slows down. He's got the mask on. But there's all kinds of oddities. But the movie was, I checked Rotten Tomatoes. It's like a 96. And when it came out, it had 4 stars. So, anything on Halloween, Scotty, for you?
I think I'm going trunk or treating with my daughter.
Oh, you are?
Very excited about that.
Where's the trunk or treat?
I think we're going to MCC.
Okay.
Community college here.
Did Cam ask you about this?
No, he didn't.
No, because he doesn't ask about people.
Oh my god.
See, that's that was kind of a breakthrough. I kind of have, interested. No, yeah, interested is interesting, right? And I'm interested in you, Scotty. Cam's not. He's interested in about one guy, Cam, right? And he knows that. We'll have Cam in our third segment. Most importantly, we're going to have Dan Ingham coming up in our second segment. I want to start this first segment by commending, by the way, Scotty on being a great dad and talking about the Yankees for being a crappy baseball team when it matters. So for those of you who haven't watched, it's time for the Yankees to put the pedal to the metal, right? This is the Yankees time of year. And they haven't won a World Series, haven't played in a World Series since 2009. And there was so much anticipation and excitement around this series. I was a prisoner of the moment, drunk on the Netflix documentary, The Comeback by the Red Sox. I've, on this show before, really felt like the Yankees would push it to 7 games, that they will come back and it will go to 7 games. Last night, I had the pleasure of calling a volleyball game, a Big 12 game, ESPN Plus, Iowa State and Baylor. Baylor was victorious. A lot of fun, really good game. You should go check out the Bears play at home. They play a game Friday night against Colorado. But I saw the Yankees were up 5-0. And I was like, wow, this is going to be like one of those things where the Yankees just beat them to death. And then all of a sudden, on the way home, it was 5-5. And then I got home. I saw the Yankees were up 6-5, and then the Dodgers get 2 runs, the sac fly, which ultimately becomes the game-winning run, comes across. And I thought, well, maybe they'll pull it out of their rear end, right? So Judge hits the double, and then I think he gets moved to third. So you got guys at second and third. So here's the deal. The inning ends, and I'm starting to like, I was working, so I really hadn't been that connected to local media. And so I'm scrolling through, and I'm like, wow, like, I guess the Yankees made a lot of errors in the 5th inning, like, to open the door to this tie game and ultimately now what is becoming a World Series clinching victory for the Dodgers. So I go back and I watch some of these errors. I was like, it was literally like a clown car had dropped these guys off in the Bronx and they got out and started playing baseball in the 5th inning. The Aaron Judge, this is like your MVP, right? I'm sorry. This is a mistake that in this period in the World Series, I'm not going to say it's unforgivable because I don't know, man. That guy's not sleeping for a couple weeks unless he drinks himself to sleep, because I know he's a competitor. His success indicates that. And Scotty, did you see that last night?
I didn't see it live. I got to watch the
So what are your
the
thoughts
7th
when you
through
see it?
9th I saw live.
What are your thoughts when you saw the coverage of him dropping that ball?
It reminded me of Nelson Cruz. And was that 10 or 11 that I think it was 2011 that Nelson Cruz was running after that fly ball.
Yes.
When the Rangers had a shot to win the World Series.
Yes.
A much better shot than the Yankees had.
Yeah.
Might I
Yeah.
add.
Oh, yes.
And totally whiffed on it as
Yeah.
well. Just unbelievable. You can go the whole season.
So you're a diehard Rangers fan.
Oh, yeah.
Now, that moment when that happened to you, there is no swifter kicking the nuts.
No.
But your team, you could say you brought it on yourself.
Right.
And so was it easier to lose that way?
No.
Okay.
And that one, if I can be melodramatic for a second.
Please.
That was so much worse because you were 2 strikes away twice from winning the whole thing.
Yeah,
This
that's
wasn't
awful.
This wasn't trying to play back into a series. This was Rangers whiffed twice in 2011. You were 1 strike away 2 different times in the same ball game, and you blew it. So it made it way worse. I would much rather lose this. In fact, in 2010, the Rangers did lose. I think was that 4-1 or 4-2 to the Giants, and that was much easier to stomach.
4-1, right?
Yeah, much easier to stomach that than when you're close.
So to what you're saying, it was a bit of I was pulling for the Yankees because I wanted to see it go to 7 games, and I just like the World Series being a background for the sports world, for my life. It's just selfish. But when I saw that series of errors, a comedy of errors, I should say, I was like, I'm out on these guys in a sense where I still wanted them to win, but letting go for somebody like me who was not a diehard fan was very easy. I was like, these guys don't have what it takes to win a game of this ilk. They don't. And
right. Like in the moments when it mattered, they blew. It's not that they got beat last night. They blew them.
They blew it. And by the way, I take full accountability. I was wrong. I had a feeling I was wrong. Won't be the last time, but I felt really good about it too. I really felt good about it. But like, if I was a Yankees fan, I might even have like an easier time sort of just disconnecting to this team. I don't know, because they have the overwhelming talent all year long. That overwhelming talent had masked a lot of these, fundamental shortcomings they had. And last night you got exposed. And the season's over, and it doesn't mean the Yankees organization isn't awesome. It doesn't take back the fact they have 27 World Series. And it's amazing how much winning they have done. There is one thing, too, I will bring up, and maybe we can talk to Cam about this. So Hal Steinbrenner, Cam, you can tell me this. Since when has Hal Steinbrenner been running the Yankees? Since 2010. Okay. Woo! Okay. So here we go. And we've talked about this a little bit. Ownership dictates success in pro sports. Whatever you felt about George Steinbrenner, they won a World Series in 2009. His last year, effectively, right, Cam? Yeah. Managing the organization. So now we've got 15 years of Dallas Cowboy-ish stuff. Now, they did make it to the World Series this year, which you can't, I don't want to be like some shock jock sports guy that it's no big deal. They made it to the freaking World Series. And it was an amazing moment for Yankee fans. And maybe they are back. But to look at the past, I don't know, what is it? How many years? 15 years. It's like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe something's going on here. So I will say that is a thread that we see through a lot of these high-profile teams, whether it is the Cowboys, the Yankees, the Jets right now, the Knicks for so long. I mean, they're bouncing back, but we have these owners who are suspect, and we have these teams who, when they get to the big moments, and some of them really don't even get to the big moments, like we're talking about the Cowboys and the Knicks particularly. But when they do get to the big moment, like we saw, they crumble. So ownership is something that I think always kind of plays a role in this. And I was thinking about Hal Steinbrenner and George Steinbrenner being gone. By the way, I've said this before on this show. This was back in April. If you really want to hate the Yankees, you should go watch the documentary on Peacock about the 1990 New York Yankees. It is craziness. Like Mel Hall dating a like 15-year-old girl, moving in, living with her family. Oh gosh, there was so much other. It was the year George Steinbrenner hired a private investigator to follow Dave Winfield around and tried to say that Dave Winfield was involved with like mob guys. The team was the worst they'd ever been. So many crazy shit. So much crazy stuff happened. So whatever. That is. I may even go back and rewatch it now because I'm so mad at the Yankees for blowing it. But that 1990 season was a disaster. And then Steinbrenner got suspended for a few years and then ultimately came back and surprise, they started winning again. So that's the World Series. Baseball season's over. Good for the Dodgers, whatever. It's cool that Ohtani won a World Series, I guess. Dan Ingham's coming up probably about 5-6 minutes. He's literally coming up to the Alico building. I saw he was in College Station today doing some work with First National Bank of Central Texas. With Scotty, we got to make sure, we'll talk to Mike, we got to have the First National Bank bar for when Dan comes in. So I want to talk a little bit about a revelation I had this morning, getting up, reading the newspaper, which I wish I had a copy in my hand, but it's impossible to get. And I was reading the New York Post, and I was reading about Karen Reed. And that's the woman who was accused of killing her boyfriend in Canton, Massachusetts. He was a Boston police officer. And they were together for 2 years. You know this. You know the case. You don't need me to give context to it. But what was it? A hung jury, Cam? Hung jury. So right now, we're probably going to do it all over again. And there's still the court of public opinion is wildly interested in all this. And everybody's got a take. Here's my take. And again, I try to base a lot of the stuff that I deliver here on like experience. Because like really what I think doesn't really matter. What anybody thinks, people can tell you what they think all the time. Okay, whatever. It's basically speculation, which speculation is another word for guessing. But when you tell me your experience and what you think your experience lends to a situation like this and how that plays into maybe an opinion or a theory, okay, maybe you got my attention. That's why I always love what former athletes have to say. And I don't necessarily want to hear I want to hear how their experience in the past can be applied to what's going on right now. A lot of times I'm more interested in the off the field stuff than what's going on the field, because I just think there's so much amazing stuff there that is still untapped. Locker room, road trips, whatever. But by the way, that alcohol and drugs is a part of that in a lot of some of these wilder stories about yesteryear in pro sports and college sports. But as far as today goes in this Karen Reed court case, I have thought this for a little while, just from the cheap seats paying attention to this, that they downplayed the alcohol, the impact that alcohol had on this entire situation, this entire relationship she had with this guy, who, God bless him, has passed away, was killed. And we still do not know how. But there was so much drinking that surrounded this night in particular, their relationship, but this night in particular. And I hadn't heard, at least I hadn't, and correct me if I'm wrong, I hadn't followed the court case that I just hadn't been so on top of it, like Turtle Boy, Cam's buddy, who's like has a major internet presence or whatever. Cam watches YouTube, and he was all over this case. But alcohol was an overarching like component to all this stuff that happened. And I've always thought that, and I felt like nobody talked about that. Like you can watch a whole, and maybe the people that mattered behind closed doors did, but I certainly didn't hear it. And it wasn't put out there in the public as much as I feel like was necessary if you really want to understand what happened that night. Like you can watch an hour or 2 hours of Dateline, which I did recently, about this. And was it my man Josh Mankiewicz? I forget. It wasn't Keith Morrison. But anyways, it was touched on the amount of drinking that was done that night in particular, but it wasn't like, look, dude, if everybody's not wasted, this guy doesn't die. That's a guarantee that I'm making right now. And now Karen Reed seems to, this Vanity Fair piece that came out today, she seems to be touching on the alcohol situation as well. Here's a quote that she had in the Vanity Fair piece. She says, I feel that everything in the 2 years I dated John was a precursor to this horrible decision of us to go out drinking and for John to think he was welcome with these people who never really acted welcoming to him before. So you got a guy that's drunk and is like, hey, let's go over to the party. Let's go inside. I'm going to come right back out and get you. He never comes back out. And then she says another quote, everyone was a drinking buddy and everyone testified as much. Alcohol is at the epicenter of this, and it was in my relationship with him. In hindsight, everything was just a precursor to this fateful, tragic night in his life, and to a much lesser degree mine. Now, I think she's sort of, it sounds like, taking ownership too. Like, look, hey man, like, it's not like this guy was running the show. You can always have a say in like how much drinking you're doing, or you're with somebody that's drinking a lot. Like I know being, and I don't know like the total extreme of it, but being in a hard abusive relationship is something that I probably can't even understand. But I do know that I've been in bad relationships where I've been able to kind of hit the eject button because there was kind of crazy stuff going on. And you'd like to think she had that opportunity and just stuck with this guy, maybe because she was in love, but there's ownership that she has to take on being a part of this situation that it seems like was predicated a lot of it was predicated on drinking. And like, I got another podcast. It's called The Payoff. I've been sober for almost 13 years now. And I'm not the guy who's always like jamming like, oh, everybody should not drink. That's not what I think at all. I will push alcohol on people in my life when we're socializing to a fault. And I don't know. I know what I know. And I know right here, like this has been underplayed, I think, in court. And I think out there on all these internet sleuths like Cam and Turtle Boy. So I'll just say that I think alcohol is an underlying factor here that's huge. But the Karen Reed case, I guess she'll have another trial. And, another thing too that came out, you talk about these cases that have everybody in the public kind of wound up, the Menendez brothers. I mean, so they now are going to go in front of a judge on December 11th, and that judge is going to give them, they're going to be resentenced. And so the possibility is that if they get, if they get 50 years, so the judge would resentence them, and the likelihood is they'll get resentenced to 50 years. Well, since they were sentenced when they were 26 and they've already served 30 something years, that makes them eligible for parole. And, they'll go in front of a parole board. Again, this is if what seems like is likely what happened. And then after they go in front of the parole board, well, the parole board has to recommend their release. And then the governor 150 days later, or he has 150 days to take a look at it and still release them. So these dudes could be out like sooner than later. And I think like that is another deal that like, if you don't want to think that like the internet is real and can have an impact on stuff, like this whole movement was put together by like young people in America who use, whether it was Instagram or TikTok or Twitter, as a voice to get this court back in the forefront. And it's back in the forefront. And the guy Gascon, who was the district attorney in LA, said, yeah, we had to do the right thing and look at it again. I still can't get past the fact that two kids went inside their home and brutally murdered their parents. Like that is like so crazy to me. I don't know what can make you do that, but if you're going to say something made you do that, you certainly better prove it. And that has not been the case for them to be able to prove anything at all. So big one here. We got Jimmy Chitwood in the studio. And this is huge. So we don't get guests like this very often. And when we do, we sit them down and we talk to them about college basketball and about everything they've experienced in Hickory, Indiana. I want to know about Coach Norman Dale because he seemed like a huge prick. We're coming back with Dan Ingham, First National Bank of Central Texas. The Pete Sousa Show, powered by the Rogue Media Network, rolls on after this.
It's the Pete Sousa Show. Sports, Pete.
Nobody tells our story